Board meeting of Thursday, May 18th, 2017 to order. Can we have a roll call, please?
Board members: Harney.
Here.
Rocha. Here. Wasserman. Here. Lazat. Courtney. Here. Constantine. Here. Tucker.
Okay, we do not have a quorum, so we're just going to go ahead and work on those things where it's just receive and review. And the only thing we have to recommend would be the budget, which is 2 items away. So why don't we start with the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Plan fiscal year 2015-2016 annual report. Recommended action is to review and accept. And I will turn it over to Edmund.
Oh, we have, sorry, the report from the PAC first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
I'm sorry.
okay.
I jumped ahead on my agenda here. I'm
All
sorry.
right.
So we have the roll call, we have a report from me, I don't have any report of the Public Advisory Commission. Mr. Glines, did you want to have a few words? Sorry, I jumped over. And I should report that we have a quorum, board member Velasco has appeared. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, the Public Advisory Committee was okay with the draft budget that's before you folks today. Members also had some constructive comments concerning the annual report that you're going to delve into a little later today, and those tweaks are incorporated in the report that Ed and staff will present. One of the things I found probably the most interesting in reading the agenda materials, because I was not at the meeting, but the scientific research, the burrowing owl in the sycamore, it's when you talk about habitat and continuing to protect habitat or enhance habitat, we're laying the groundwork of so much information that is going to enable us and other cities and counties and whatever to move forward. And that is just as the good guy in me says, keep it up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Glines. Right now is the time for public comments. Members of the public may address the Implementation Board concerning any item not on this agenda and within the respective subject matter jurisdiction of the board. The length of public comments may be limited by the chair, me. With limited exceptions, the board is prohibited from discussing or taking action on any item not appearing on the posted agenda. I have no cards. Angie, do you have any?
No.
And so there, we have no public comments, so we'll move on. First, I'd like to welcome to his first meeting our representative from San Jose, Councilmember Don Rocha. Welcome. Welcome. And Dolan, Board Member Velasco, is this your first meeting as an alternate?
No, I think I've been here a
Been
couple
here?
times,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. So, welcome anyway. You helped us with our quorum.
This is my first meeting.
This is your first meeting. Yeah, right. Right. So, we would, Mr. Harney, this isn't your first meeting, is it? No.
No, it is not.
No, I'm just, you all look so new to me. Maybe it's the springtime. Maybe it's the springtime, you all look so new.
It's my new and improved haircut.
New and improved haircut, that's what it is. Okay, all right. Now I will turn it over to the regular business, which is the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Plan fiscal year 2015-16 annual report. Recommended action, receive and accept.
Yes, and Tara Donovan's going to come up and give you an overview of the annual report, which after your review of it, we will submit to the wildlife agencies.
Okay, thank you. Please proceed.
I'm Tara Donovan. I'm the Principal Program Manager with the Habitat Agency. And I'm going to go over our fiscal year 15-16 annual report. You may be asking yourselves, why so long ago? But we report on the fiscal year, and the report's not due until the following year. And so this annual report goes above and beyond what you guys typically see in the meetings. It is our compliance reporting on our permits. So we have a state and federal wildlife endangered species permits. And this report documents the compliance with those permits. So it summarizes our impacts from covered activities, the conservation actions we've taken to offset those impacts, and also takes a look at the financials of the habitat plan. Are they in line with what we assumed they would be when we developed the habitat plan? So there's only 10 things you need to take away from today's presentation, and there will be no quiz. So in this past fiscal year, we covered 57 projects, acquired 1,800 acres of land, which we've confirmed that there's 11 of the 18 covered species on it. We have 6 restoration sites across 3 watersheds. We've created 1 plant population. 920 acres of burrowing owl breeding habitat is now under management. This will be the first time we are reporting on the stay-ahead compliance. We or our partners received 7 grants totaling $2.4 million to implement the habitat plan. And we received a total of $8.3 million of revenue from the covered projects. And then there's a third permit that the Habitat Agency administers, and it's the Regional General Permit. And this is the first year of implementation, and we streamlined permitting for additional 3 projects. Now the details. So our covered projects. In the past year, these 57 projects were covered, included 31 private projects, 23 public projects, and 3 participating special entity projects. In red, you can see the permanent impacts, and in orange, the temporary impacts. So you can see across the private and public projects, the permanent impacts were nearly equal, with the private projects having more temporary impacts. These projects impacted a total of 601 acres of land. There was 119 acres of temporary impacts, and then streams were impacted to the tune of 14 feet of permanent impacts and 840 feet of temporary impacts. So who covered these projects and where were they? So in the city of San Jose, you can see here in orange, covered 17 private projects. There were 7 in Morgan Hill in blue, 3 in the city of Gilroy in purple, and 4 in the county of Santa Clara in green. Looking at the public projects, the city of San Jose covered 6 projects, county planning 1 in purple, county fleets and facilities 15 projects in pink, and many of these were the solar projects that were built by the county this past year. 3 projects by participating special entities, 1 Habitat Agency project, and then 10 projects covered by the Santa Clara Valley Water District. So where are we to date? So if we look across the past 2 fiscal years, we can see that we're relatively even on impacts. So in the first reporting period, we had about 503 acres of permanent impacts compared to 601 in the second, so about a 20% increase. And then temporary impacts are affected similarly. When we look at the cumulative permanent impacts, we can see that about 80% of the impacts are developed in agricultural lands, with about 20% of the impacts occurring on natural lands. In addition, a total of 168 feet of streams have been impacted. Okay, so this is the damage we've been doing. Oh, sorry, one more. So looking at the distribution of projects and looking ahead into this next fiscal year, the public projects permitted under the Habitat Plan year to year are relatively constant. You can see here in green that public projects have about the same amount year to year. Where we're seeing variability is under the private projects. So in the first fiscal year, we permitted a total of first fiscal years, we permitted 49 projects that increased to 57. And as of the third quarter of this fiscal year, we've only permitted 36. And we're seeing that change due to the reduction of private projects being permitted. Okay. So with these projects, the funds that come in from these projects, we do preservation. Our first acquisition was the Coyote Ridge Open Space Preserve. And this was acquired by the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority, and then they gave us a conservation easement on the property. So this 1,800-acre reserve, so those of you coming from up north past it, it is about when you hit the Metcalf Canyon Power Station. If you look up and to the left, that's Coyote Ridge. So that's and it runs about to the landfill. So Coyote Ridge consists of 1,800 acres running north to south along the ridge and is in the central part of the county. It is located in the high priority conservation analysis zones, Coyote 4 and Coyote 5, and contributes to 3 critical linkages for wildlife in the region. It fulfills 10% of all the habitat plan land acquisition requirements and protects 12 different land cover types, with the rare serpentine bunchgrass grassland being the dominant type. This property fulfills a third of the serpentine bunchgrass grassland acquisition requirements, and it protects aquatic features such as streams, springs, wetlands, and ponds. So the site provides habitat for 14 of the covered species, and there are 14 known occurrences of the covered plants. The bay checker spot butterfly, shown here, and the most beautiful jewel flower, shown here, this property fulfills over a third of the habitat acquisition requirements for those two. For Mount Hamilton thistle, shown here, and the fragrant fritillary, shown here, nearly half of the requirements for their habitat is included in this reserve.
Is that in our logo?
Yes.
Huh?
I wish I had a prize to give you. It is home to a herd of 40 elk and is also habitat for other rare species such as the American badger. It adds to the preservation of contiguous rangeland in the county, and grazing will continue to be the main management tool on the property. So in the past year, we did species surveys. And so we kind of played the game of what we thought there. And we hired consultants to go out and to look for our rare species. And so I'm going to go over each of the species we thought would be present on the preserve, its status on the reserve, and the management that we're doing for each species. And the management on the Coyote Ridge Open Space Preserve is done by the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority. They own it, and then we have a management agreement with them for cost sharing of management in accordance with the habitat plan. So bay checker spot butterfly, present. So this is an occupied core habitat, and it's estimated that 25 to 50% of the Coyote Ridge population is found on the preserve. For management, we use cattle grazing and invasive species removal. For California red-legged frog, also present, it's found breeding in 2 of 6 ponds and sheltering in 3 of 6 ponds, plus a failed pond, seep, and stream. For this species, we plan to restore 2 ponds, excavate 2 ponds, and install fencing to protect locations that have been impacted by cattle. California tiger salamander also present. It's breeding in 3 of 6 ponds, and we plan to do the same actions as for red-legged frog for the species. Foothill-legged frog is not present. This species is only found at this time above reservoirs, and this site is below reservoirs, and there's no suitable breeding substrate on the site. We don't expect to find the species there at any time, so we don't propose any management. Western pond turtle is also not present, but it is within dispersal distance of the site. So as part of our restoration projects, we'll be installing basking habitat to see if we can get it to come to the site. The burrowing owl is found there overwintering, and we plan to implement actions to encourage it to breed on the site or neighboring properties by installing artificial burrows. Tricolored blackbird is not found on the site. There's only 2 to 3 breeding locations in the county, none of which are on Coyote Ridge. But we do plan to install vegetation for the species as part of our pond restoration. All right, on to the plants. So for each of the plants, I'll go over if it's present and what we assumed under the habitat plan. So as part of the habitat plan, we assumed that plants were in certain places. And then for each species, for many of the species, we had a target in terms of the size that we wanted to have for each plant occurrence. And these are our preliminary results as part of our baseline studies. I'll tell you about what we're actually finding on Coyote Ridge. These are inconclusive results, and we'll be, over the next few years, we'll be establishing the baseline, but it gives us kind of a first year's look at what's on the reserve. Santa Clara Valley Dadia is there. We assumed 108 occurrences, and each occurrence was targeted to be 2,000 plants. We haven't determined the number of occurrences, but we have 60,000 plants on the property. Vagrant Fritillaria is there. We assumed 3 occurrences, we found 2, and they total 30,000 plants. Loma Prieta Huerta, we assumed 0, but we actually found 2 occurrences totaling 220 plants. Mount Hamilton Thistle is there. We assumed 16 occurrences. We found 5 with 22,000 plants. Smooth Leucingia, we assumed 1 with a target population size of 2,000. We found 1, but there's an order of magnitude difference.
Wow.
Nearly 30 million plants. Most Beautiful Jewel Flower, we assumed 3 occurrences targeting 2,000 plants each. Again, there's fewer occurrences, only 2, but 3 million plants.
Must be tough to count.
One.
Got a clicker.
7, 8. Start over.
Metcalf Canyon Jewel Flower, we assumed 1. We have 8 occurrences of nearly 1,000, totaling nearing 1,000 plants. So as we're finding, the plants are much more prolific than we thought in terms of their abundance and distribution. In places where we assumed numerous occurrences, we're finding fewer, but that's because there's more plants in each occurrence. And so I think as we look throughout the reserve system, we'll find similar things. As you're looking for more plants, if they're within close enough proximity, we consider that a single occurrence. So the better they're doing, and at the end of the day, we may have fewer occurrences, but we'll be protecting larger quantities of plants.
Ms. Donovan, Board Member Courtney has a question.
Tara, I'm really interested in, this is great information. I'm wondering if you could explain for me how the plan and the wildlife agencies view the sort of what's most important to them, right? Is it the total number of plants? Is it the number of occurrences? Is it the total land cover? How do they sort of evaluate our progress?
I'm going to get to that.
Oh, thank you. I'll just be
So
quiet.
if you hold that.
Board Member Wasserman?
Thank you. Question for you. When you're expecting 2,000 and we end up with 27 million, whatever quota or objective or goal we have?
It's the same, it is an issue that we have to discuss with the wildlife agencies, because our compliance is dictated by occurrences rather than absolute number of plants. And so,
Okay.
while everything's just much more prolific.
Okay, well, that's why Santa Clara County is the best. On the previous chart, where you expected under species present, you expected, but there weren't any. Is that if you expected them there, then it must have been a habitat in which you thought they could be there. So is there a possibility of, is there relocating? I know we talked about once about the burrowing owls, and when projects go up as far as, is there an opportunity for us to relocate endangered species elsewhere that are in danger and moving them to habitat that is conducive to their survival and us getting credit for that?
We typically don't do translocation. It's really a last resort issue or option, and we are considering it for the burrowing owl. For those species that aren't present, for all except for the yellow-legged frog, we'll be improving the habitat, and that should attract the species to the site. There's just not suitable habitat on the ground.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Yes, I just one question. So in terms of the occurrence, is that just like a visual identification of the species being present? How do you define occurrence?
Good question. I had a slide on that, but it was a little too complicated. So occurrence is a number of individuals within a quarter mile of one another. So it's any number of plants that meet that definition. And that's for all of the plants except for the Mount Hamilton thistle. This one is defined by drainage because they typically are in a single drainage in this area. And so that's it, a group of plants within a quarter mile of one another. So as you can see here, when plants are much more widespread, as we're seeing on Coyote Ridge, we're going to have fewer occurrences because there's not as big of a distance between each occurrence. Is that?
And
Yeah.
one thing we want to talk to the wildlife agencies is the proportionality. If 6 plants are being impacted and we're protecting 27.5 million, there needs to be some thought about proportionality and sort of getting away from the strict construct of just occurrences.
That was going to be my next question is, if you have 1 or 2 occurrences, but you have millions of plants, does that mean it's invasive and choking out other wildlife? What's the conclusion of these single occurrences with like high frequency or high count?
In this case, it's great news. Yeah. So they've evolved over time so there's different seasons that they come up, and they've learned to coexist with each other, the plants in this sort of niche ecosystem. So that's a great thing to have that many. But the way the plan defines this quarter mile separation between occurrences is problematic here when you have 27 million plants. If it was an invasive plant, yeah, it would be choking everything out. Yeah, but in this case, they co-evolved together, and it's a good thing.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
And if anyone's going to the Calero opening, Rancho San Vicente, you might be able to see the most beautiful jewel flower. This one might be in bloom now, so if you go on a walk, you'll be able to see that, as well as the Mount Hamilton thistle. So you'll see what they look like on the landscape, and they're very delicate, so they don't really choke things. Well, with thistle, it's pretty dominant where it's at, but these delicate jewel flowers they don't choke things out. Okay. Any other questions?
You can continue.
Okay. Okay, next, restoration. So 6 restoration sites across 3 watersheds. So we have 2 at Calero County Park in the Guadalupe watershed, 1 project at Joseph Grant Park, and 2 at the Coyote Ridge Open Space Preserve in the Coyote watershed, and 1 along the Pajaro River in the Pajaro watershed. Okay, I promise I'll move faster. So at Calero County Park, we partnered with County Parks and the San Jose Water Company to create a pond and wetland to benefit 4 covered species, as well to provide water for cattle at both sites. We've completed this project in this past year, and we've initiated our first year of monitoring. Thankfully, it's been a banner year for rain, and so we are seeing a lot of water in both the features. At the Coyote Ridge Open Space Preserve, we're partnering with the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority to restore 2 ponds. We're targeting 4 covered species, and the ponds will each have pond and wetland elements and also provide water sources for cattle. We're in the current planning phases for this project with construction in 2018. At Gonzales Ranch, we partnered with the Nature Conservancy and Point Blue's Straw Program to plant a riparian corridor for wildlife linking the Santa Cruz Mountains to the Diablo Range. Here, a climate-smart plant pellet was used to ensure that there is food for insects, birds, year-round. This is an ongoing project. At Joseph D. Grant County Park, we partner with County Parks to do a riparian stream and wetland restoration project. Here, we are going to reconnect the floodplain and also improve park infrastructure to move water off of trails and roads during the rainy season. We're currently planning this project, and it will go to construction in 2017. So Coyote cenothus. The Santa Clara Valley Water District has been leading the creation of a Coyote cenothus population. There are 4 locations of this plant in the world. They're all here in Morgan Hill. So as part of our permit, we're required to create find 2 populations. And so the Water District has taken the lead on creating a population up on Coyote Ridge. The first planting failed due to the outbreak of Phytophthora, which is a waterborne mold. In the past 2 planting seasons, they've had success doing direct seeding, shown here, as well as planting container stock. So over the past 2 wet seasons, they have had success with the population creation and are on target to create the population. Boring owls, the cutest. So, sorry. We're working with the Santa Clara Regional Wastewater Facility to manage boring owls on their buffer lands. We've entered into agreement with them to manage 200 acres, 72 of which will be enrolled in the reserve system via conservation easement. This is our most successful breeding population in the permit area, with the largest number of adults and fledglings year to year. This is because the site has been managed consecutively for 5 years for the owls, and so the management is paying off. With the Don Edwards Wildlife Refuge, we're now managing a total of 920 acres of habitat for the species. So stay ahead. So this is where I'm going to go into the plant occurrence issue, and are we in compliance? So the stay ahead is one of our compliance metrics. It's tracked by natural community rather than land cover type to allow for flexibility in the reserve system assembly. Compliance is tracked as a proportion of conservation achieved and expected compared to impacts incurred versus expected, and a 10% deviation is allowed. So for all of the natural communities shown here in green, we are either meeting or ahead in the stay ahead provision. For conifer woodlands, there's been no impacts. For riparian forest and scrub, we're below. And this is because there's just no riparian habitat up on Coyote Ridge. But there is in Calero County Park. So we have a 3.3 acre deficit, and this will be fulfilled with the enrollment of Calero County Park plus the restoration project at San Felipe Creek. So both of those things we anticipate happening the next year, and so we should be brought into compliance. So for plants, this is the issue of us having fewer occurrences versus protected versus impacted, whereas our occurrences are much more prolific and widespread, but there's not as many of them. So we've had impacts to 4 of the covered species. For Coyote cenothus, there have been 206 plants impacted, and that's been offset by the population creation, so we're okay there. For Santa Clara Valley Deadlia, we haven't determined the number of occurrences yet, but since we only have impacted 4 plants, we think that the 60,000 plants we preserved on Coyote Ridge should offset our impacts to that species. For smooth Lysyngia, we impacted 6 plants, but we have 27.5 million plants. While technically, per the terms of the permit, we're not in compliance, we are protecting a very large occurrence of the species. For most beautiful jewel flower, we have impacted 110 plants and have offset that with 3.1 million plants. Again, we don't have the proper number of occurrences protected, but we are complying with the spirit of the plan of protecting a large number of plants. So there's a number of plants that we expect to see on Calero. Either we've seen out there already, or we have mild habitat for the species. So Mount Hamilton thistle, Santa Clara Valley Deadlia, Loma Prieta Hoyta, Smooth Lysyngia, and most beautiful jewel flower. So with the enrollment of that property, we will be protecting additional occurrences of these species. So again, with the enrollment of Calero, we believe that we'll enter compliance with both stay-ahead provisions. So revenue. So our revenue has two sources, fee funding and non-fee funding. And before I get into this, what I'm presenting to you today will be different than the revenue summaries you've seen for the Habitat Plan in the past, because this is looking at the Habitat Plan assumptions and how they tracked our funding compared to money we actually received. So for fee funding, what we looked at was the actual fees received for each covered project that was permitted during the reporting year. The actual timing of us receiving fees and closing our books don't always line up. So some of these fees were reported for the next fiscal year rather than the past one. For non-fee funding, we also count land acquisition or grants obtained by our other local partners that benefit the Habitat Plan. So Coyote Ridge, which is not included in this fee summary, was acquired by the Open Space Authority, but we don't include it. We include that as a source of revenue, although we never actually received it. So when you look at the Habitat Plan's actual revenue, it's not going to match up exactly with what we track for compliance reasons.
Tara, let me interrupt you for just a second. Rich, you have to leave here at 4? It's 4:30. 4:30, okay, all right. And Edmund, how much time do you need for the budget?
I can do it quick.
Well, he moved from 4 to 4:30, so
Okay,
that's why I was interrupting.
we
Tara.
could move the budget ahead
Next.
of,
Yeah.
yep.
Okay.
And I guess a question,
Yeah, quick is still good, but.
yeah, I got a question would be also with the closed session.
Right, right,
I would defer to council on how we should handle that.
yeah. How much time do you think you need?
So do we need I think we need a quorum for closed session too.
Right. Right, and so how much?
Well, actually, if you're not asking for any action,
On the compensation, for me, yes, there's an action.
well, they can't take the action in closed session, they can only make a recommendation.
Oh, recommendation, perfect, okay, great.
So why don't we, let. We don't need quorum for the closed session. Let Tara finish, and then we'll go to the budget,
Yeah,
and then we'll come back to the next one, and then we'll go into closed session.
okay, great,
Okay,
thank you.
just so we're sure we have the right amount of people. Okay, go ahead, Tara, I'm sorry.
I promise I'm almost done. Okay, fee funding. So we have $4.8 million of fee funding from land cover fees, serpentine, nitrogen deposition, boring owl, wetlands, and participating special entities. Our non-fee funding totaled $3.5 million, and this include grants either issued to the Habitat Agency or our partners of $2.4 million, and then voluntary contributions or mitigation-only agreements for $1.1 million. So looking over year to year of the revenue, in years 1 and 2, about half our revenue is associated with the Coyote Ridge acquisition. So that's why you're seeing a lot more coming in over the first 2 years compared to this year. So if we take that away, there's about a 20% difference between years 1 and 2 and year 3. So we're doing pretty well. So with the grants don't only come to the Habitat Agency. They go to us and our other partners. And so the Habitat Plan has provided benefits to others working in conservation in the plan area. The biggest winner has been the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority. They've obtained, I think, this year, about over $11 million worth of grants because of the Habitat Plan. And so other partners include our local Resource Conservation District, San Francisco Estuary Institute, University of California, Santa Cruz, San Francisco Bird Observatory, Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society, and Talon. As you see in year 3, we've been getting quite a few grants ourselves, and we expect to see the similar progress year to year. And so our funding from grants is about equally split between state and federal sources, about 85%, with private funding about 15%. So one of the key goals of the Habitat Plan was local control and increased certainty for project permitting. The Habitat Agency now administers 3 permits the Fish and Wildlife Service and California Department of Fish and Wildlife endangered species permits, as well as the U.S. Army Corps Engineers permits. We've permitted a total of 106 projects through the endangered species permits, and now 3 projects with the Army Corps of Engineers. That's been the Calero Restoration Project, San Jose Stormwater System Improvements, which actually was multiple improvements, about 11 kind of sub-projects, as well as the Watsonville Road widening. Okay, so today I talked about the private, public, and participating special entity covered projects, the 57 of them. These projects, along with the grants received in our relationships with other local partners, contributed to the Coyote Ridge acquisition of 1,800 acres. On this property, we've confirmed that 11 of the 18 covered species are there. We've initiated or completed restoration across 3 watersheds and 6 sites. We've made progress on creation of the Coyote ceanothus population. We now have 920 acres of boreal owl breeding habitat under management. We are nearly in compliance with the stay-ahead provision, and will be in compliance once we enroll Calero County Park. We received 7 grants, us or our partners, of $2.4 million, and we received $8.3 million in revenue. And the third permit that we administer, streamlined permitting for 3 projects. Special thanks to all the co-permittees, to you, to our consultants and other partners in the area. Without everyone's help, the Habitat Plan would not be a success. Any questions?
Board Member Constantine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Go back to the revenue summary. Is it normal to have the non-fee funding and the fee funding so close? Or is the non-fee funding just artificially high this time?
So we actually, the Habitat Plan predicts 55% of the funding from fees and 45% of the funding from non-fee sources. So for our program, it's close to what we assumed it to be.
Right, okay. Right, thank you.
Anyone else? Commissioner Courtney?
It's actually not a question, it's just
Thank you.
thank you and great appreciation for the report. I think that while I've sort of understood what we did at a conceptual level, this filled in a lot more discrete in terms of how the work actually gets done and the impacts. So terrific work.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I agree. Commissioner Velasco.
Thank you. With regards to the grants that we're applying for and that the agency is receiving, are we accounting for, within that grant, your guys' time that are put into the grant for implementation purposes and stuff? So does it, in other words, is it offsetting your revenues?
We typically aren't, typically the grants we're going for are near $1 million or more. So I think the smallest one, we partnered with the OSA, Open Space Authority, on one for about $900,000, but we're typically targeting grants that are in the millions of dollars. So
Yeah,
if I spend 40 hours on that, it's not a lot of my time.
No, you mean for administrative?
For administrative.
No, many times we use that as a match on the grant. But there is something we've talked about with the Water District D2 program. Deborah Calden actually brought up to us about including some sort of administrative kind of offset for that. But some of these grant programs won't, like the Section 6 with the feds won't let you do that. So some of them.
So the agency absorbs that cost?
Yes, correct,
Okay.
yes.
I guess what I was trying to figure out is if there was an opportunity to offset some of the agency costs by.
No, it's a great question, yeah. And with some of the local assistance grants, those research grants, I would say yes, but typically we've used our in-kind as a match on those grants.
Okay.
With the land acquisition grants, those typically, they don't allow for administrative reimbursement. But yeah, we will look at that though.
I'm
Yeah.
just looking for ways to keep the administrative side costs down.
It's a good idea. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay, any further questions? Council, the recommendation is to review and accept. Do we need a motion for that? Ms. Amaretto?
So moved.
Okay. Moved in second. Do we need a motion to, it says to review and accept. Do we need a motion for that? Or can we just do it on acclamation?
You could do it by acclamation.
Okay,
But
so
you
I
could,
think
a
we-
motion is also acceptable.
Okay, so it's moved and seconded to accept the annual report with much thanks, and very good report. Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right. Okay, so we're going to move to the annual fiscal year 17-18 draft annual operating budget, which is item 3. Mr. Sullivan.
Thank you. Thank you, board members. Today, it's just to basically review and recommend adoption of the draft budget, operating budget for fiscal year 18. So your review and recommendation would then go to the governing board, who would adopt the budget. So just briefly, this is a slide that was presented at the budget workshop and has been refined. So our estimated budget for 16-17 was, for revenues, was $15,162,818. And we expected revenues of over 12 million. Our estimated actual is very different than that. It's kind of turned upside down, with most of the revenues coming from grants and other sources. So for the mitigation fees, and Tara's slide that showed only 36 projects permitted through the third quarter kind of reflect this discrepancy with the amount of mitigation fees. And it was primarily 2 projects in San Jose, which I'm sure Councilman Rocha is familiar with, the Meadowfair project in East San Jose, the Evergreen area, and Phase 2 of Communication Hill. City planning staff thought they would be pulling their grading permits this year, and it looks like neither project is going to pull their grading permit before the end of the fiscal year. And we've gotten some better intel and kind of description of the Meadowfair project, where it's going to happen in phases. So originally they thought there would be a mass grading permit for the 81 acres, which would have triggered all the fees being paid upon the pulling of that grading permit. So that's where the discrepancy has come from. The good news is that on the grant front, we projected 3.1 million, and it's over 14 million. The challenge is that most of those grants and other funding, like PG&E is going to partner with us on an acquisition, so I wouldn't call that a grant, is that we have to acquire land to tap into that resource, into that revenue stream. So our budget for 17-18, based on the more, I'd say, detailed information from the city of San Jose and from the other partners, is that we expect mitigation fees revenues to be around $5.5 million, and grants to be somewhere in the $4 million, $2 million of those being a Section 6 grant, for a total estimated revenues of $9.5 million for the next fiscal year. On the,
Before you go on.
Yes.
wait a minute. So you mentioned that the 16-17, the change in the actual was due in large part to two projects in San Jose not moving forward.
correct.
is there that much in borrowing owl fees that would have come out of those two projects?
Just the one, yeah, the Meadow Fair.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because that site is within the Burrowing Owl fee zone.
Fees, okay,
Yeah.
all right.
And those two projects together was going to be in the 8 to 9 million range in terms of fees coming in.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Okay, go ahead.
And now on the appropriations side, so for 16, 17, we anticipated a budget of almost 3.7 million of total expenses. Estimated actual is around 3.1, which is a 15.6% decrease in the amount of expenses that we expected which is good. And part of that is related to, as you notice, the technical and permitting support. A lot of that's being done in-house now versus being done by consultants, so that's why there's a lot of savings in that budget line. And the construction for the restoration project came in under budget for the Calero project, slightly under budget. So for 17, 18, we're anticipating administrative expenses will be $1,174,000. The technical and permitting will be $312,000, and conservation strategy implementation will be over $2.1 million. The majority of that being the San Felipe Creek restoration and the Calero, the Calero continuation of the species surveys out at Calero and the Coyote Ridge Pond restoration. So we anticipate our expenses in 17, 18 will be slightly over 3.6 million. So the final Habitat Agency budget will be submitted to the governing board for its approval on June 15th of this year if the implementation board agrees. Yes, thank you.
Any questions? Then I need a motion to
I'll second
recommend
that.
adoption to the...
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to recommend adoption of the draft annual operating budget for the fiscal year 18. All those in favor? Oh, questions, I'm sorry.
On the fees, and I'm interested, again, very new to this, the
Yes.
collection of those. Is that process, administrative one, going smoothly? Everything's going well? You're not having any issues? I know with a new agency, you're oftentimes trying to get that ball rolling, but it appears that everything's moving well for you.
It really is, shockingly so. You know, working with the 6 co-permittees on this aspect of plan implementation has been great. There was a little bumps in the beginning, but everybody is collaborating with us on that. So the finance departments or the finance entities within the 6 partner agencies have done a great job of getting us the fees at the end of the quarter. Yeah.
So then who's the holding agency?
Oh, it's the county right now. Yeah, the
Okay.
county holds our money, so they're kind of like our banker. Yep.
Understood.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Anyone else? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? That motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Mr. Sullivan. I guess we decided to to move over to item number 2. What's the time on that? 5 minutes? Okay.
Well, that's not faster.
No.
I'm kidding.
All right, Jerry, you're up.
Thank you, everyone. I'm sure I'm in here somewhere. Okay. So this is a report on a report that you can take back and report to your associate. Report on a report on a report.
Then report out to our respective agencies.
Right. So we'll start with an overview of the RGP.
It's a Section 404 permit. It's required for any project that impacts waters of the United States, or what's termed waters of the United States. And it's issued by the Army Corps of Engineers to the Habitat Agency. It gives us the ability to expedite the approval of the Corps permit for all of our co-permittees. So they absolutely love it. Covered activities under this RGP are projects that are half an acre or less of wetland impact, or up to 300 feet of linear feet of stream or creek impacts. Projects that exceed those limits would have to go through their own separate 404 process, and woe be to them. The types of projects that are covered are any that impact the waters of the United States. So you can see the pictures down there. It'd be new bridges or bridge repairs, upgrades to culverts or stream drainages, and even wetland impacts associated with new development. Many of these projects will be constructed, there'll be construction or maintenance of existing infrastructure or new infrastructure. So the permit is a great benefit to our public works departments, Valley Transportation Agency, and to the Water District. The annual report is a performance requirement of the regional general permit. So we report on projects that were approved and constructed in the previous calendar year. We also provide mitigation information in the report, and gives us a chance to engage in a dialogue with the Army Corps about how better to improve the process and create greater efficiency in the review. The image at the bottom shows all the projects that have been or are being processed through the RGP. I'm sorry, I'm getting louder, I'm not sure why. The Calero Pond and Restoration Project and Wetland Restoration Project was the only one that was permitted and completed last year. We have processed 2 other applications that Tara mentioned earlier for Watsonville Road widening and the San Jose Stormwater Outfall projects. And a 4th application is currently under my review now. Be finished up in a couple weeks. So that's 3 projects already this year. And I think with all the havoc that nature has wrought on the environment over this past winter might mean we're going to see more of these applications coming in. I would expect to see the number go from 3 to 7, 8, or 9. The in lieu fee is an important component of the regional general permit. The program hasn't been completed yet, but we're nearing a determination on that. Once it's approved, the program will create a uniform accrediting system that will allow us to track impacts and mitigation. And the program will allow mitigation to be provided off-site in the same way that our incidental take permits allow us to acquire land and restore it in other locations other than where the impacts are occurring. With the program, projects can proceed as soon as the fees are paid instead of having to wait until after the restoration is complete. So this is a list of current and future restoration projects. When added to the restoration credits that we will receive from Calero, these will provide ample credits for to facilitate the approval of projects from our committees over the coming years. San Felipe Creek restoration that Tara spoke of will begin in late summer. Coyote Ridge Ponds the design work is already underway, and we expect that to pick up in the year after. And by conducting 1 restoration project each year, we're not overextending staff resources or funding. We're creating these credits slow, drip, drip, drip at a time. We're also targeting projects in the in San Jose in the urban creek or urban stream impacts. Urban creek restoration projects in San Jose. This is because urban impacts to streams are common for a lot of our co-committees. And there's also a fair amount of grant funding that's applicable to urban in-stream projects, particularly for disadvantaged communities. And we're targeting streams in the South County too to ensure that we have restoration projects in both San Francisco Bay and the Central Coast water boards. So as a quick wrap up then, told you to be fast. The RGP saves time, money, and resources. Win, win, win. It brings us one step closer to one-shop permitting. The grand vision is to have the Habitat Agency provide expedited review and approval for all state and federal permitting agencies with authority over activities that impact habitat. So the report was sent to the Corps on March 25th. Next year's report will be submitted about the same time, so we'll come back with a report for you at that time. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you. Any questions? I still have to commend you for the way you are able to get anything out of the Corps within a reasonable period of time. I realize what we do at the Water District is a little larger, but still, the fact that you get your
A lot of credit goes
permit
to our
and-
executive officer. He's a bit more gray now than he was when he started going through the process.
Well, I have to, you'll have to tell us some secrets someday. But anyway, thank you very much.
Sure.
Sure.
Thank you.
All right. The next item would be the report of the executive officer. Did you want to do that or go into closed session?
Real brief.
Okay.
It's just one item. I figured with the annual report and the budget, you got sort of a general sense of what's going on since the last meeting. So we had the California HCP Coalition had their annual meeting here in Morgan Hill. We had around 65 people from around the state attended the meeting. Board member Constantine welcomed our guests to Morgan Hill, and we had a very successful event. So it was the first time that the coalition had their annual meeting here in Santa Clara County.
Despite me being there, it was.
Yeah,
It went well. Anyway,
exactly.
well,
Yeah.
well, I would have been a little nervous.
Oh, he was.
Was? Okay.
Very, very nervous.
He hit it well, though.
Is that it?
Yes.
Okay, then we are going to adjourn to, we're not going to adjourn, we're going to move into closed session, after which we will come back out for any further public comment, and then we will adjourn the meeting. We made a recommendation with regard to the executive director that will be forwarded on to the governing board, we believe for approval. And so with that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.